Got it right. Okay, so I won't bother introducing myself, that has been done. I'm here representing an organization called ASEF, even though I'm an employee of Meta, just clearing it out. So I'm representing ASEF in my personal capacity. I'm here with my colleague Ego, and we thought it's necessary for us to come together in this society, in this community, to talk about the backbone of Africa's internet, which is subsea cables. So I'm starting off with an introduction of ASEF, what we're all about, initiatives and work streams we're spun up. And then I'll share a 3-minute video about subsea cables. There's a huge misconception in some cases of what subsea cables are, what they do, and what the internet is. So hopefully that video will help a lot of us in here. And my colleague is going to run through an overview of the subsea cables deployed in Africa, and the ecosystem, the impact on the internet, challenges, gaps, industry efforts and collaboration efforts, opportunities, next steps, resources. And if we have time, we can go through the Q&A section. So ASEF is Africa Subsea Plus Ecosystem Forum. And our mission is to support Africa's Subsea Plus ecosystem growth and evolution at scale. So we have themed ourselves Africa from the inside out, meaning we want to concentrate on Africa's opportunities, challenges, because we understand them better from inside Africa and of course out towards the global community. So ASEF is an industry-led initiative. It's a nonprofit organization, community-led as well. And we are involved in the development of subsea ecosystem and industry initiatives in Africa, focused primarily on increasing and improving local awareness, education, talent, technology, and policy. May I have a show of hands of anyone who's involved in the subsea industry here? 0. Okay. Oh, there's one person? Oh, okay, that's perfect. And just a question, I'm sorry, I probably have to single you out because you're the only one. Is this a profession you thought of from early ages, maybe high school, university?
Oh, exactly.
No, okay, yeah. That is, it's not uncommon, and thank you very much, sir. It's all around the globe, including people like myself who are now working in subsea. Part of my role at Meta, I'm part of the To Africa rollout. So that is my involvement. It's only because I'm at close proximity, but for most people, they have never heard about subsea. And this is one of the reasons and the backbone of our research and our interest in all of the gaps that we then discovered and observed, which brought us to the formation of ASEF, which we crystallized in 2022 last year. So we observed that there is low awareness, low participation of Africans in the global subsea space. I recall one conference I attended, there was only 1% Africa participation. And I thought this is something we can improve on. It's just a matter of an awareness. It's not an Africa problem, it's a global problem. But I think we have the opportunity right now to get into the cracks of some of these gaps and make a difference. So I've been talking about Subsea Plus. The reason why I kept saying plus with an emphasis is you cannot ever talk about subsea without recognizing the partner, which is on the terrestrial. So we all know service providers, MNOs, those who give us our cell phone coverage and the like. And then there's also another ecosystem which thrives on good internet access and usability, which is all of the fancy things that we're talking about, cloud services, machine learning, AI, Gen AI, and soon to come, the metaverse and the like. There is a definite correlation to how we develop the subsea and its capacity into the terrestrial, which needs us to all pay attention to. Okay, so we are here as a community, right? We're coming from different aspects or different silos, if I should say. Some people here are policy makers, some are from the government, some of us are technical, some of us are coming from commercial backgrounds, some are lawyers. And at the end of the day, they say when you want to run fast, you end up running alone or you run alone. And for us, with all the challenges we have, it's about running far. So this is why we are coming together as a community. I heard Prof saying this is an incubator for sure. I've seen a lot spinning out, including the Zimnog that I was talked about. It all spun up from conversations in rooms like this. So we are looking at a community and we are run by a community. I just want to shout out to other co-founders who are online, who have joined us online, Sade and Kemi, who have also seen these gaps and have joined us to come up with solutions for Africa and for Africans in the subsea space. So why do we exist? We exist because, first of all, we want to support the global industry. We don't work in a bubble. Some of the protocol standards, all the cables and components that make up the cable, make it functional, are produced somewhere else. And we are just part of that ecosystem because we roll these cables out on our seashores. So we would want to plug in and be impactful, also learning and exchanging ideas with the global community. Secondly, we would like to promote youth and minority development by increasing the African talent pipeline. At a global front, this is open information which the likes of Optic Foundation have shared with us. There is a lack of participation from young people in the subsea space, and the majority of seasoned experts who are in this space are also reaching their retirement age. It was a closed community, but it's opening up because at some point, we're not slowing down the rollout of new cables. I'm sure you all know there's new cables piece to Africa, there is Equiano, and just to call out that To Africa is one of the cables that's surrounding Africa, which means of all the countries that are involved, there is new participants in that. And where are we going to get the expertise to maintain, to operate these cables? And where are we going to, if we don't start now, thinking forward about how to close this gap, where are we going with the development of subsea systems on our continent? These are the questions we're asking ourselves. Thirdly, we're looking at supporting the industry and technology. Every single thing on the internet is developed by a human being. Of course, can be fancy and say Gen AI is producing things or whatever, but fundamentally, we look at how all of these cables are brought. When we talk about cable and transmission on a subsea cable, there's new technologies out there. There is hopes to create petabit capacity from a single cable that's laid. Right now, we're talking about 180 TB on To Africa, for example. I think Google, if I'm not mistaken, would you know, Ego? About 100. This was never the case a few years ago. So all of this development on the cable itself and on the components that make up the subsea cables, this is all important for us to be involved in, to understand it, so that we can be participants in pushing it forward to the next generation of cables and transmission networks on subsea cables. Then we're looking at strengthening the policy framework. Africa has 38 coastal countries, and of those 38, there's 16 that are landlocked as well. So the total makes it 54, if I'm not mistaken. And when you look at cables that are being developed, there's going to be more participation from countries that have never dealt with subsea cables before. Subsea is very broad, so we can talk about the technicals. That might be maybe difficult or simple depending on where you are. There's also commercials that are specific to subsea. There's also legal frameworks that are specific to subsea licensing, and all of those, they're complex in their own right, and maybe even more complex when we're talking about 38 countries trying to make sense of this thing and trying to roll it out on their shores and trying to push that capacity into their countries for their users to benefit from. It's definitely something we are looking into and would love to close this gap as well. Because if we look at it on a policy framework as well, there are countries and sub-regions within Africa who have spearheaded, who have done so well, who would want to leverage on this expertise and maybe come up with standards and frameworks at a regional level so that they can work for the best for those who are entering the subsea space, and it will speed up the way in which we then roll out these cables. Then lastly, we're looking at improving investment and the return of investment. Investment for new cables, there's consortiums that come together normally for open access cables. They come together because they're expensive. It's expensive to roll out an undersea cable. And also for cables that are there, I'm just going to call out a few, there's more, which Ego will touch on. But the likes of ACE, WAX, these cables, at some point will reach their end of life. That is a known phenomenon, it's physics. But we can surely unlock more ROI from those cables before they get there, as we progress with newer technologies on undersea cables. And we're also looking at how traffic demand scales up on the terrestrial networks to increase revenue and support the subsea infra across Africa. So as a team, we thought, okay, there's different expertise, different areas of interest. We have 4 major work streams. The first is the technical community, which looks into all the advancements, all the buzzwords that are going around. How can we introduce AI into subsea, into operating networks, into maintaining? There's a lot that is going on. Right now, I was hearing about drones going into the undersea bed to help out with maintenance, to do some surveys. All of that is stuff we can do as Africans here on the continent, and of course, with our counterparts in the global community. The policy community, education and career development. I'll stop there and just comment. I was asking someone, how big do you think a subsea cable is? And they said it must be this size, maybe the circumference of a drum. The answer is no. It might be smaller than your finger. So it's all of that, just awareness for students, breaking it down into bite sizes. The younger they are, we just make it plain simple, and we go further as we address different education institutions and their levels. And lastly, the industry. and commerce, which will touch on the development of industries that participate in the subsea ecosystem. And of course, this will roll into programs that we have, virtual workshops, and summits going forward. So I'm going to play a short video as promised. This will give an introduction to what subsea or a background of subsea cables. And thereafter, my colleague Ego is going to come up and carry on with the agenda.
I'm sorry, Nomsa, we've already used up all the time. We have maybe 5 minutes remaining. This is the scheduled end, but we can have 5 minutes for questions or for a quick wrap up.
Okay, so using the rest of our time wisely, I'll go through pretty quickly in terms of looking at subsea cables in Africa and the impact, some of the challenges and opportunities to collaborate. As my colleague Nomsa mentioned, you have a lot of cables, getting up towards 30 cables surrounding Africa, either landed or in development. You have many countries, almost 9, that only have 1 subsea cable landing. And on the other hand, you have countries like Egypt, South Africa here that have 11 cables, Djibouti, Nigeria, Cameroon, and so on. And what you can see in some of the cables highlighted here are the differences in capacity, going from less than a terabyte all the way up to the newer cables that are hitting 180, over 100 terabytes, and then predictions of going up to petabytes within the next few years. So it's an incredible amount of development and demand. And so, yeah, covering the different cables, you can see a little bit of a correlation between the countries that have a lot of cables landed and the internet penetration. Of course, there are many other factors once you cross from subsea into terrestrial, and policy and cost of deployment and right of way and so on. But I thought it was very interesting to look at the countries that have the highest subsea cables all the way to the lowest, and the correlation or the pattern in terms of internet penetration. And we can even see in Ethiopia, which is a landlocked country right next to Djibouti that has 15 subsea cables landing, you see 16% internet penetration. So there's a lot of opportunity for partnership and driving the capacity inland. Subsea cable industry from the 1850s to now, we're really sending in the 1850s Morse code signals across the transatlantic, and now we're getting into sending high resolution videos. And so as an example, cables that carry about 90 terabytes per second, they can carry about 18 million streamed movies at the same time, to give you an example of the capacity. And then in terms of some of the challenges and gaps in the ecosystem, one of the challenges that subsea cables encounter are cuts of the subsea cable. And this can either be due to natural occurrences or due to man-made occurrences. So recently in August, there was an undersea landslide, and that affected 2 major cables that were coming into Africa. And so both in West Africa and South Africa, the internet access was affected. And so that's the impact, the unseen impact of subsea cables. And then my colleagues already talked about education gaps as well as talent gaps. I stumbled into subsea almost by accident, computer engineering, started out developing and designing mobile phones, and then moved into the data center and the fiber industry, but ended up on a beach in the southeastern part of Nigeria, managing UK and Malaysian divers to land cables in Africa. So it was very interesting entry into that industry. And like Nomsa mentioned, we want to promote a lot more awareness of this, so that coming out of high school, no matter how long ago that would have been, you have an interest in subsea and see this, whether you're policy, lawyer, technical, or program manager as myself, there's opportunities to participate. And one of the key things we also need to be aware of is providing internet and providing coverage is one thing, but on the other side, what are we doing in terms of affordability and devices for people to use? We're stepping in, moving from 3G to 4G and 4G to 5G, looking at coverage across different countries. And even for Nigeria, when I was working on developing the Nigerian broadband plan as one of the consultants, yes, we can have fantastic coverage across the country, but what are we doing so that people can afford these end devices and actually access and pay for data? If the cost of data is what it costs as your monthly salary, then we're not going to reach that level of impact. So that's one important thing to keep in mind. So this is just some of the industry players that are helping to develop the internet infrastructure globally, from content providers to manufacturers of the subsea cable, to people who run the vessels, to the MNOs, as well as the internet societies as well. So I thought it was important to highlight that many people are involved in this industry and to raise awareness there. And then also to highlight people like Optic, Google, Optica Foundation, Meta, Vodafone, Orange. They've all been pushing to get more awareness, driving schools, driving certifications, reaching back to really educate people about the industry and hold workshops. And so this is something we hope to expand on, raise awareness of, and drive it globally. Now, post-pandemic, a lot of these workshops can be hosted in hybrid fashion, just as this conference, so people can access it wherever they are. And that will help to promote the industry quickly.
Okay, I'm sorry, Egomaro, I must ask you to wind up now. We've gone past our time.
Absolutely. So this is second to last slide that just shows what ASEF is doing. We were at ITW, obviously honored to be here now. In November, we'll be at Afritech, educating people about what we're doing. And in December, we're partnering with Tech Connect in Kenya, in Ghana, South Africa, and in Nigeria to reach out to universities to educate about subsea, the industry, and the opportunities for the career. And then in 2024, we're going to have quarterly initiatives around the 4 tracks that were mentioned. How do we have specific impacts within the industry? So they'll be targeted and measurable, so that by the end of 2024, we can come back and actually present the impact that we've been having across the continent. Some resources which we'll share on the slides, which are publicly available from all of these companies. And if you want to reach out to us, asefafrica.org, info@asefafrica.org. And if we have enough time for questions, we'd be open to them. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. We have gone past our time, but there are several questions that have been entered in the Zoom chat. We don't have time for all of them, but I'm going to try to paraphrase one which is specific to subsea cabling. Since these cable, the question is from Advocate Nandipa and Saluba, and I'll paraphrase, I won't just read it verbatim. How do we deal with the extraterritorial issues regarding subsea cabling? Because a lot of them are in the deep sea outside territorial waters. What are the cybersecurity realities and the international legal mechanisms that apply to such cables?
Fantastic question. Lots to cover within that question, and a lot to unpack. So you have the domestic waters, and then you have the international territorial waters. And there was a question about how we deal with those issues around cybersecurity and maintenance as well. So very broadly, I'd say the subsea cables, whether it's individually owned or the consortiums, ensure that from the cable landing station, there's encryption end to end. And they have monitoring systems that actually monitor all along the length of the cable, so they can tell whenever there's a breach, maybe in terms of the severing of the cable, because we're talking about, hundreds of kilometers below the ocean at the seabed. It's very rare to see people trying to penetrate or affect the cable physically. You'd more likely see attacks at the cable landing station, and making sure that there's security in terms of access on the terminal and equipment, I would say. And in terms of the maintenance, each subsea cable has insurance with vessel providers. So whenever there's a cut or a damage to the subsea cable, they've already paid for insurance, and vessels get deployed to go to the point where there was a breakage or a damage, pull up the cable from the ocean bed, resplice it, test it, and put it back into operation. So that was a very quick answer, but at some of the links and resources we provided, you can go into the detail in terms of security around subsea cables and international waters versus domestic waters, some of the challenges that we face within the industry. So I hope that answers it.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I think we do have to move on to the next presentation. Thank you very much to Nomsa and Egomaro. Now our next presentation is a recorded video.